let's speak to our eyes and ears on the ground, the founders of these innovative startups that are the driving force behind the African transportation and logistics sector's growth. In this final segment, we'll be speaking with the visionaries behind some of the most successful startups in this space. We have Adetayo Bamiduro, co-founder and CEO at Max, and Miishe Addy, co-founder and CEO at Jetstream Africa. Okay, so let's start off with rapid introductions. I'd like to get your take from the both of you on how you've uniquely approached transportation and logistics in your respective markets, starting with you, Miishe.
So Jetstream Africa is a digital platform for e-logistics and financing, specifically for importers and exporters. So we specialize in cross-border trade, which involves a minimum of 9 different logistics vendors to move a single shipment.
Sure, that's a lot, and I'd love to dive into more about how exactly you do that. Coming to you now, Adetayo, in terms of how you've approached transportation and logistics.
Max sits at the intersection of our electric mobility and our vehicle finance on the continent, right? So essentially, we use the subscription model to enable gig drivers, delivery drivers to be able to access the vehicles they need to do their jobs on a day-to-day basis.
Okay, brilliant. Now, let's dive a little bit deeper, Miishe. Your solution very much looks at logistics as well as financing. And like you said, to move one single shipment, it would normally take 9 suppliers. So how have you streamlined that? And I want to ask specifically, looking at some of the recent global shocks, actually. I mean, we had the COVID pandemic. We've also had Ukraine-Russia that has impacted global logistics quite significantly. Have you found that in your journey you've had to pivot and at some point? And what does the final solution look like at the moment?
So our platform digitizes one of the most important aspects of our job. So our job is not just brokerage, finding suppliers or finding logistics vendors to work with. It's coordination. So our ability to coordinate a truck driver with a warehouse operator, with a shipping line, that's where the value is, and that's where the technology comes into play. When we were hit with COVID from 2020 to 2021, there were cases when the borders were closed, when flights were stopped, where cargo was stuck at distant airports or distant seaports. And our customers had no idea what was going on. And the one thing that we can control as a digital freight forwarder is the communication to our customers. So our platform is really built around making the financing fast, making the booking process fast, and making sure that communications and the transparency around what is happening in the supply chain is as efficient and open as possible.
Yeah, and I mean, this also makes me think of just some of the challenges and difficulties that can happen when you're looking at transport and logistics in simply being able to operate in different markets, different territories. And I'm quite curious actually to hear from you, Adetayo. I know that you didn't necessarily start on a subscription model. How did that come about, and how are you looking at expansion? I believe that you're operating in over 16 cities. Are you looking at more? What does that look like for you?
The objective for every startup is to expand and grow as much as possible, right? Of course, while trying to deliver profitability at the same time. As you rightly said, we're currently operational in 16 cities. That cuts across 3 countries at the moment. That in itself has taken a tremendous amount of effort, right? But still, the opportunity is there. The market that we are serving is much bigger than our current footprint. Across the continent, I mean, there's easily 200, 300 cities of different levels, right? That are in need of the product that we provide. For us, in the next milestone is to get to 30 cities, right, across about 5 countries, hopefully over the next 12 to 24 months. But yeah, I mean, there's almost virtually no limits to the market opportunity that we have. But we just don't think about it from a market opportunity standpoint. We think about it from a market need standpoint, right? There are people who desperately need the product that we provide. And obviously, we want to stop at nothing until we're able to serve every single one of them on the continent.
Okay, and I guess that is very much the motto of most startups, at least we hope. But coming back to you, Miishe, 2019, the AFCFTA was ratified. How do you view, how has this impacted actually just your sector and your operations?
So the rollout of ACTA has been relatively slow, but I think the awareness that the legislation has coming has started to change people's mindset. So we have seen a new crop of e-commerce platforms that we are partnered with that are focused on intra-Africa trade. And so Jetstream is sort of the back end for these e-commerce platforms. We're moving the cargo, we're financing the cargo, but the marketplaces are being built by new entrepreneurs that are seeing an opportunity to connect Ghanaians and Kenyans and South Africans on a single platform. So it's very early stages for the legislation and very early stages for implementation, but I think we're going to see increase in e-commerce marketplaces taking advantage of the big opportunity.
Yeah, and the other side to that is also the infrastructure to support it. Adetayo, I'm quite curious how you encountered infrastructure. I mean, you're literally operating on a subscription model. These are hundreds and thousands of users. What does that look like from an infrastructure perspective, but also regulation?
I'll start with infrastructure, right? And infrastructure cuts across, payments infrastructure, cuts across things like maintenance infrastructure as well, since we deal with vehicles. And as you definitely know, for many cities on the continent, the scale of infrastructure development is still pretty nascent. But what that has meant for us through our journey is, at every inflection point, we've had to build our own infrastructure from the bottom, right? So we joke in the startup world in Africa that you set out to build one company, but eventually you realize you have to build 10 companies in one, right? Because you virtually have to solve every single problem that you meet, because the infrastructure in most cases just isn't there. And even when it's there, you have to still build some sort of workarounds to enhance it and make it function the way you need it to. So we've essentially had to build out all the critical enablers for the solution that we deliver, from the payment systems to the KYC systems and so on that are required, even the fleet recovery systems, the IoT systems, the tracking platforms needed to deliver the solution that we provide to our customers. So yeah, from an infrastructure standpoint, we've definitely had to build a lot of that internally. But I mean, it's fun doing that, because you really feel like you're helping to build your country, trying to help build your continent as well. It's a tremendous amount of work, but also extremely rewarding.
Oh, Miishe, go ahead.
I was going to say, Tanya, one of the most important things I think about the AFTA is this idea that there's an order of operations. Certain regulations need to come before others, and the most important regulation, in my view, is the mobility of people. So Jetstream does both import and export financing. Right now, export financing is dominant. We've done about $7 million in financing over the past 2.5 years. And in many cases, when we're working on an export, we're working with an African business that is exporting commodity, usually an agricultural commodity. And the buyer is oftentimes an Asian or an American or a European business that has come to the continent and sourced the supply and built a familiarity level with the supplier and with the supply chain, and uses Jetstream to run the cargo. We're not seeing that so much among Africans doing business with each other. And I think there was a recent story where Dangote was saying that he has to get more visas to travel around the continent than a French citizen or a foreign citizen outside of the continent. And until we get that mobility of people, that freedom of movement around Africa, we're not going to see these big business deals which drive intra-Africa export. So I think there are some fantastic initiatives with payment settlement and other infrastructure developments, but it's really the mobility of people that gets to the heart of how business, export-import business is done at the start.
Indeed. Well, I'd like to say a big thank you to the both of you for joining us today and for sharing your insights and for sharing more about your respective solutions. It was an absolute pleasure speaking to you. That was Adetayo Bamiduro, co-founder and CEO at Max, and Miishe Addy, co-founder and CEO at Jetstream Africa.